Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for having waited for lunch. But actually, while we were waiting for lunch, we realized that there were lots of interesting questions and remarks that various participants had, and that enabled us to continue discussing with Lisa and Kultu. Thank you for having accepted to come back from the lunchroom and to continue. It's always challenging to start the afternoon session, but when you look at the next topics that we have on the agenda, then you actually find that energy with us. So this afternoon, we're very lucky to have three speakers that will share their ideas, updates, and perspectives with us. So we'll be on the one hand talking about adaptive management. That means what the MDs need to know about new developments in the policies of GCF and how to adapt to it. We're going to talk about aspects of country strategies because in the mornings and since we were speaking including with His Excellency the Minister of Environment, we brought up this issue of what planning and strategy was. So we're going to have friend that will help us consider country strategy. And then after that, we will have, as Sandra had alluded to, we'll be talking about this new tool that is being developed to enable us to make good use of to Dr. Nitu, who will give us an introduction to these new analytical tools. So then, thank you again for having me joined. Now I'd like to ask Sandra then to us in the first communication of the afternoon. So we'll be talking about resilience, adaptive management, and alignment with GCF priorities. So Sandra, I'm ready for you.
Merci beaucoup.
Much. Thank you so much. So I would just like to have a discussion with you on the systemic problem that we face in our efforts to engage the GCF and other equally. So it has been 10 years now that the GCF is operational. In terms of resources available is $30 million. It's much, but it's not really much. So on the $30 million available, 80% of these resources have been made available through institutions accredited of international access, and 20% or less through direct access entity. That is, those are entities that represent our countries, either at the level, regional level, national level. This has its advantage and also has its inconveniences, its disadvantages. It can have the advantages in this sense that these entities help us to mobilize funds for our countries. But we observed recently that these entities prefer multi-country projects. Regarding the complexity of the procedures, the duration of the mobilization of resources, and the excessive cost of the transactions with GCF, these entities prefer to optimize the mobilization of resources and work with many countries, several countries. In the implementation part, it may happen that our countries have access or not to these resources. But the good thing is that it helps us to have our name in the list. So when it's a country that have got the benefited from the funds, the negative thing is that we've not got the resources, and this will not help us to build our capacities. And so in this contest, and the contest of 10 years GCF in spiritual evolution, a GCF that is being built. We think that for this workshop, we should carry out discussions around the resilience of institutions that harbor the NGAs in a context where the GCF is trying to adjust the police services. For the first years of the GCF, that was in 2019 to 2023, the GCF was in a situation whereby it had a lot of resources, but no many projects. So the GCF wanted to show that it was in action. It was looking for projects. Even if the projects were not robust, they were ready to fund projects. So they funded some projects. You have examples of projects that have been funded during that time that you can refer to as projects financed by DCF, by which actually do not respond to projects that DCF will have funded regarding its objectives. So that was phase 0, 2014 to 2019, phase 0. We have an intermediate phase where GCF started to clarify its procedures, its policies, and so on. And they also updated their programmatic realities, so priorities, but these priorities have not been tested, and these priorities were, say, being shared with countries. During this period, we have many documents that were produced by DCF. The manual operation manual of DCF. The DCF drafted an operating manual that is proposed, which gives directives and guides on what the GCF looks for when you want to finance a project. What are these priorities? So you have this manual, and also programming manual of the GCF. It's a version that explains to entities that present projects to GCF what the GCF expects from them. And GCF develops what you call a appraising guidance. It's a document of 400 pages that explains how the GCF evaluates projects that are submitted to it. During this phase, the GCF also updated its framework of management of resource. And today, the GCF has what we call RMF, Integrated Resource Management Framework. They also developed a handbook that explains for each domains of resource, what do they expect to see? What are the indicators to look for? How to assess them? What is the methodology and so on? So during the phase 2 of GCF, that is from 2020 to 2023, the whole of these manuals have been developed and they have been made available. There have been many suggestions to share them. Today, we are in another phase of GCF 2024 to 2027. Having done submission of projects to the GCF and the two things. The first thing that I've understood is that we have more clarity on what the GCF wants, expects, because from all these documents, they explain to us what they really want. The second thing that I've understood from this is that this clarity makes things more complex because they are so precise in what they want that if we don't follow exactly the methodology, this makes things more complex. And nevertheless, these are documents, heavy documents that you have to read or to understand exactly what they want. If you choose another educator that is in another domain, then all your logical frame does not work. So you need some precision to be able to share, okay, to submit. And this has made things more complex because of this clarity, these precisions. And then there are some reforms that are being done at the level of the secretariat with the new executive director that's been appointed last reform of the secretariat. Recently, I have a former colleague of this year who asked me, Sandra, who is the new director of GMA? GMA was a former division of Department of GCF, okay, Division of Mitigation of Adaptation. So you say, who is the new director of GMA? I said, there's no GMA anymore. I said, yeah, really? And what about GCP? GCP doesn't exist either anymore. The GCF as you used to know it at the creation, it does not exist anymore. There's a completely new structure to which you have to adapt. And more than the executive, apart from the executive chief, we have different departments: chief operating officer, chief strategy officer. Under the chiefs, we have directors that we didn't know. Today, GCF is organized in regions. You have the director of Africa, director Asia, Latin America, director of investigation, investment, director of co-investment. It's a completely new organization, different from the organization that I knew in the past. And even for me, it's difficult for me to adapt to this new institution that have been put into place. For us, not to make things easy, following our lobbying advocacy, because the accreditation is difficult, the readiness is difficult. This year, decided to engage into reforms, and today you have a new program, a readiness program, different from what you used to use before. Objectives as a capacity vision of satellite maps, no, they don't exist anymore. The accreditation that has not yet been adopted by the GCF, but there's a big discussion around the issue of accreditation to know what should be the strategies of accreditation. They are talking about asset strategies, and the asset to GCF goes to different ways. The accreditation is just one way. Another way is GSA. And today, the GCF is still taken about another way of access, means of access. For some of us who have been engaged in the GCF, seeing the discussions on the climate change through Cancun, and it is an negotiation that we don't find ourselves in. We cannot recognize. It's an negotiation that is getting close, getting to a sort of international multi-institution, a sort of banking system, which is completely different from what we have known. So we need to adjust, okay, try to adjust and adapt to this entity with a structural organization completely different, with strategies defined completely different and policy different from what we knew in the past. As for that, we should take time to familiarize with these changes to understand how we are going to get opportunities from these changes so that the GCF in its communication should not say that I'm facilitating it easy, making things easy for you, and in our reality, things becomes more complex and difficult and more inaccessible. So I wanted to explain why we wanted this forum to dwell on the resilience of the institutions that harbor the NDAs in the context of the change of the policies of GCF. We are going to talk about all these policies that are changing one by one, and also about the insurance framework that is changing, and also the operating documents that are more precise. That's today we need to follow Jito if you want to succeed to. When at the GCF, we are complaining that you speak to 10 different staff members, you have 10 different opinions. And this was a problem for us because it was completely changing. But at least when you are able to establish an understanding line with this staff, you can move. But today, from my last experience, I think it is quite difficult. We wanted clear policies, but they have been too much precise in the same way that there's no more flexibility. So we have to know really exactly what the DCF wants. And when it wants in the domain of result, this domain of results is different from this domain of result. We have to have precision in all these ones in the context where GCF wants to clarify its procedures. So this is why we want to speak in the context of this workshop. Tomorrow we'll talk about the readiness and to the new framework of the readiness. And I want to be able to call your attention on only one thing. Only one thing. The readiness will change significantly. The GCF is not very clear on what will happen to delivery partners as we knew them in the past. They are not clear on what will happen to delivery partners, but they present to us today two modalities. I'll talk about the second modality. I will invite you not to pay attention to this model. Okay, methods. The GFS has launched an offer to attract institutions that they assess and put them in the pipeline as institutions that are pre-qualified. And when there will be requests from countries, they'll ask these institutions to do some mini trends among themselves, and the GCF will give the market or readiness market to these institutions. The call for proposal has been launched. There's a list of more than 300 institutions that have submitted, and the GCF that have applied. The GCF will make a selection, and this will be they'll make a pool for the propositions of the pre-qualified institutions, and this is through these institutions that the GCF want to implement the readiness. So we ask many questions. What are the links between these entities and the countries? We don't know. How are they going to work with the countries? I'll ask you not to really pay attention much to this window. There's a second window, okay, which is the first one that you should really focus on, and they are not talking much about it. That's what they call the country window. Today, there's something for the readiness at this a country window, where the executive director say she doesn't want to make things difficult for countries. She wants country to manage their own readiness, and she puts into place these country windows. If you are in the Ministry of Environment, if you are the Direction of Environment, if you are the NGA, and you want to go to the country windows, this DCF want to make things easier for you. So the form for the country window is very simple. We should all focus on these country windows that will help us to mobilize enormously the resource for the period 2024 to 2027 is $7 billion per country. There's no yearly allowance. You don't pay allowance for 1 year. From 2024 to 2027, every country had the possibility to mobilize $7 million. And the country windows is one of the windows. So the General Secretary, the Secretary General says that when a Minister of Finance comes to her to ask for a resource for a title of a country window, she will afford, she will make it available. Because she knows that this Ministry of Finance has a project with the World Bank and for the PNUD, and she doesn't need much evaluation to assess this proposal. This language is very clear. So she wants countries takes advantage of this country window, even if it's not for the envelope in completely, but part of the envelope. Every country should find institutions, public institutions, and gets profits from this country window. Now the rest that should not be mobilized. Countries will be invited to use the institutions, pre-qualified institutions, through this call for proposal to complete that. It is not really clear up to today what will happen in 2025 for delivery partners that as we knew in the past. My understanding of the thing is that the GCF doesn't want to keep them. It doesn't want to make business with them. So it's only the political pressure that's making them not to say that they don't want to continue with them. But their preference the good use of these investments with these institutions. For instance, 400 proposals have been proposed, but only 5% of these concept notes have been achieved as a project on the table of the GCF, and we are approved by the board. Okay, you can develop country 20 or 20 projects, and they don't get to the achievement. So with this concept note in these pipelines, okay, this will serve to help. So it seems that these issues have not been strategic to engage countries in this way, and they are not more interested in working with them. That's why they put in the RFA to pre-qualify the call proposal for them to qualify those who will be able to do that. So the two means will be used. There will be the country windows, and every workshop that you organize will talk about the country window and the LSP. Let's say we call for countries to be accompanied in the FSCA for the country window. We were able to work with the Environment of Ministry of Environment Togo, send it in Niger, Ministry of Environment in Madagascar, to do the FMCs. These FMCs should accompany a simple proposal with the country window to mobilize a part of the funding. We estimate that to start a work of $1 million will be more interesting. But if you have more means, you can go up to $3 million as a country window, depending on the capacity of the institutions, and leave the rest for the entities of the pre-qualified entities of the LSP. So these are what is going to happen with the readiness. And we are going to talk about that in details tomorrow. And we'll listen to countries on their experience with the readiness, how to have ideas for the readiness, how country to get profits or experience, and listen from countries that have been able to get resources from the readiness, and countries that have difficulties could learn from this and move forward. For the accreditation, the GCF has worked on the portfolio. Today we have 150 institutions to get credits. Among these 150 to get accredited, 130 have signed accords, making them ready to mobilize resources at the level of the GCF. How many have been able to mobilize resources with the GCF? Half of this number, around 60, 70 entities have been able to mobilize resources of the GCF. So that means that 50% of the entities ready to work with the GCF didn't have a project with the GCF. Then this is a problem. The accreditation is not an end itself. The accreditation is just a step to go on with investments with the GCF. But we know that today 50% of entities that were ready to work with the GCF have not been able to mobilize resources with the GCF. At the same time, we have in the pipelines of entities about 150 entities that are waiting, some for well, for 7 years, others for 5 years, others 2 years, okay, and those maybe recently. So looking at the political pressure during the course, the GCF decided to put a focus to clean up the pipelines. They are going to accelerate the accreditation of these entities. We may have 300 entities accredited in the GCF, the level of GCF in the 2 years to come. But the GCF added a detail that says we want to dissociate the accreditation from the programming. What does it mean? That means that we will give you accreditation, but we don't promise to that you get the resources. What does it mean? What does it you are going to get accreditation to you because you don't want the costs for them to tell us that you are the 7 years that you've been in the pipelines, they are going to accredit you. But the DCF today dissociate the accreditation with the programming. You are accredited, but you don't have the guarantee to get the resource. Okay. And the GCF, which has about 350 staff members, how can you think that the 350 staff will work with 300 entities? So if this happens, we have 300 entities, then the context will be rude and difficult than before. Some entities will get into this, but they will never have the opportunity to mobilize resources. And the majority of these entities will be the entities, direct access entities. That's why we need this forum to see how we will be able to help our direct asset entities to get advantage of these changing policies, which in appearance seems clarify things, seems make it seems easier, but in the implementation day by day, from our experience, make things more complex. So I want us to explain this to lay the basis of the fundamentals of our discussions and so that we get committed, engaged in a strategic manner in the framework of the program that we offer, in the framework of the partnership with the GNAs, the NGS, and to see how we can continue to collaborate and ensure that our engagement with the GCF should be productive. That is, that our engagement with the GCF will be concluded with projects effectively implemented on the field, because the entities that you accredited will be able to mobilize resources at the level of the GCF. So I will stop here. Is that to lay down the basis of the discussions, and we will reflect and discuss this issue from tomorrow. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Thank you for having informed us on these new aspects of these developments. Thanks also to have brought in the character of the reality check, as you say in bad French, because it's very important. That to reinforce what Sandra has said, however, the direct access entities do not represent 20% of the projects that have been approved by the GCF. So this shows you the problem that is at hand, and that this may be more serious. Okay, can worsen. So it's really important to have an idea on that, and we thank Sandra and SSA and other partners to understand the challenges that we have at the level of GCF, and to able to adapt and to able to have access to more resources. So I think that is this aspect of the management that San has brought in today. So before we move to the other presentation, we will take some questions and observations before we continue. Okay, thank you, coordinator. Thank you. The information that you shared with us, it's not a question, but it's a proposal. I want to, as we move in the workshop, I want to know if you can already have an idea to share some booklets with us on the NP. All that you've had as information, okay, you can put them on paper to make a sort of booklets for that a small booklet, okay, pocket booklets that you can use to have the same understanding of what we're doing. And this will be a sort of pillar for okay our success. This is just a proposal. Thank you again for the presentation. That's all very clear. Thank you, coordinator. Yes, Jean. Yes, Jean. Okay, he's just a bit elder brother. He's not a Jean. I am the Jean. Dr. Kamai is our big brother, and then we go to the Jean and to our colleague of charts. So, Dr. Kamai, you have the floor. I didn't ask for the floor, but as you asked me to speak, I'll say something. I think there's something missing in what has been done. It is the volume of funding mobilized by the two entities, the direct and the indirect. Okay, it should also okay analyze. See the direct, what did they get? If the direct does not mobilize much, why the indirect mobilize much? You see, okay, why we are insisting that this entity should be created. So, so you should see whether it is necessary to say all the time that you should have these entities accredited as the others. Now the others, for the experience that I have, they are just friendships. The GCF, from the point of view negotiations, so so the money is deducted from the United Nations. Let me say in different fora that at the end we didn't get anything. But there's a point that we are missing. All that we've been doing is quite technique. That the partnership with FAO, again, but the policy as such, what do we do in a country where we try to with GCF to gather ministers and to see what the ministers can do so that people can understand that they have so that you have the forum at the level of presidents. Okay, the matter of finance that is dedicated to countries is has to be taken far. So there should be a forum between presidents and a prime minister. Okay, if you look into our countries, there's not a prototype that you can influence the position of the prime minister or the president. And we also suffer from that as technicians. We don't have a support. So even for education, you don't have much. So there should be a volunteer to be able to gather these people. Today, these institutions, FAO, FAO, World Bank, and so on, okay, they support the project, but at the end, nobody says that what you have done is good or not. That's the difficulty. Me, as a NGA, I do reports every quarter. Okay, it's not capacity building, but the NGAs, the role of the NGA needs to be precise so that they know what they are in for. Okay. We do it sometimes, but country like the Niger, the NGA is not a person, it's an institution composed, okay, made up of the responsible and the assistants. So for me, I have to share the conceptual notes with the country authorities. So for this, we need to gather and to have this meeting is difficult. You have the means. We do it at times, but we have the accredited institutions to use some funds and at times we organize. All these questions, we need to really assess them, take them into consideration. As you said, the document is very heavy. pages and pages. Maybe we should do something like a booklet that will help the NGS to understand all these reforms. That's what I wanted to add. Thank you, my brother. They say the Jean is Mr. Pierre Laba. So, Jean, you have the floor. Thank you. I think my big brother has spoken about it. I'm seeing the fate of the NGS getting to their disappearance. Because when Sandra explains these things, she has been very clear first. She explained everything. And when I look at this, regarding what she has said, I'm feeling like our presence is useless because the organism for which we work is making disappear what we count on the capacity of the NGS. If now from then on you don't have this, then you don't have any way. So when they say they want to evaluate the process, how are we going to do it? They are trying to remove our clothes to strip us on the field. So this is what I see. Okay. Maybe if there's another way, other ways to change, that would be good. But this reform is going to make people run away because the NGS, you don't have a structural means. And at times, the first system, they invite you, okay, they tell you are invited to General Assembly, but you don't have the floor. They don't take into consideration your opinion. And so even when you go, they don't even take in charge your expenses. So now I think that the new system is not giving power to the NGAs regarding what we want to create in our countries. So practically, I'm not seeing myself in this issue of NGAs because they don't have the means to support us. And it is the organism that has the creation of the NGAs. But if there is the first one to say that, oh, no, then countries will do what? Okay, they don't have the means. So thank you. Thank you, Jane. You give the floor to the NGS of Chad. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Sandra, for this information that I'll say more pedagogical and technical. Because all the information that we shared, we learn a lot from them. But what I could give from this information is that you should have the time to learn to master the strategies. And these strategies have always been there for more than 10 years. 10 years that we are still learning the strategies. We are going to learn the new strategy. And the liberating strategy. The liberation by the policy is still there. And I don't want to say to trip Paul and quote Peter. Mr. Grinya, you have the floor. Thank you for this information. It's a lot of information to digest at the same time. And as the president dynamism then is for us to adapt, to adjust. In every institution, there are reforms, and we have to make efforts as well so we're able to adapt. But what I'm taking the floor to call attention on this is more that we'll be able to get to engage in. You don't see it on the field. And if you have to engage policies, this is from the little that we have that we should show. What they see on the field is what to encourage policies to support and to influence even these reforms at the level of DCF. So what do I want to say? When organizers you have to get into multi-country projects, if you go on the platform of most of our countries, who have many projects approved, but the implementation doesn't follow. On the NTA, if you say this project has been approved and what have you reached for the implementation, the NGA is incapable of telling you that, okay, there's this amount that my country has been able to mobilize after the approbation, the agreement on this project. Okay, I'm expecting the reform at this level, but I'm surprised that the reform went elsewhere. I was expecting that these multi-country projects, there should be multi-country projects more regional than international multi-projects where you see a country, West African country with a country of Asia. You don't have that have been approved, which have the name, but the countries don't have any penny from these projects. Thank you, Mr. Grignan. I think that we will ask Sandra to react to these questions and we'll see whether you have some other questions later on. Thank you very much. These are comments generally, but I want to clear some points. It is true that the point of the capacity building of the NGA is that, as we knew it, does not exist, but understand what's happening. Before we had entities that were delivery partners who go to the GCF to get the resource to build the capacity of the NGAs. And that is what the executive director doesn't want anymore. What she wants today is that countries come to her to take the resource to build the capacity, their capacity. And I think it's a very good thing. And it is where the country window is going to, I want to insist that country window, say it me, country window, say it country window, say it all, country window. That's it. So the country window is going to respond to the fact that the NGA doesn't have any resource. This is when you draft your request, and then you know that so the country windows, you have framework of constitution that needs regarding the climate change, regarding the programming of the GCF, then you budgetize as resource. The GCF wants these reasonable resources and they will give it to you. So you are no more dependent on any accredited entity to give you this budget because you are going to have it yourself under your management. So I want you to understand the change that has been made and the fact that there's a special window for countries. So things are going to be bad for us if we don't make good use of this country window, and that we still in the logic of the past. That's the other entity that mobilize the resources for us. That's why the country window should be explored by every country at the table here to see which institutions in our country can play this role for us and how it can improve the access to the funds. So that's the only point that I want to clarify. And I won't stop to say it every day. This country window that have been put at our disposal to implement parts of all their readiness projects. Thank you, Sandra. It's very important, the country window, and actually, I want to make this remark that this is just an enlargement of the effort that the SSA was trying to do as you're taking the NGAs. You have to do the FMCA to be able to manage these resources, and this is something that will be open to any country. It is really important. As you know what happens, the consultants, interest consultants will take all the money. Okay, instead of it to go into capacity building of countries, the foreign consultants will take all the money. So thank you for, let's say, country window, country window, country window. But Big Brother, you wanted to ask something? I'm with the Treasury. So there are things that you have to be careful of, because if the money comes to the national treasurer, it may go to other domains, but it will work as Sandra told us. Okay, you don't need to. Okay, probably it should be more effective by focusing on the window, country window that will be open. We need to reflect on that. That's very good. I think that is a good lesson in the matter of prioritization, to see what will bring much more to the countries. Sandra, we have been able to reassure you that the NGA is not going to disappear. Okay. So you should be able to adapt to the policies in such a way that you should have better access to these resources. So let's clap for Sandra to thank her for the presentation. Thank you. We're going to continue with the discussions later on. So we are behind. Brother has said it. Kofi Kumasi to come in front to share with us his perspective and his suggestions in matter of development of strategies, country strategies, and having in mind, as the big brother said at the time, I know the topic is very interesting. So Kofi, you have the floor. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me this afternoon to be with you to share with you some ideas on the very important theme in the climate process. Is at the level of the. It's a very serious thematics, and I'm going to make a short presentation of some slides, and after that we can have exchanges when needed. So my presentation will be around the mapping of the stakeholders. So these are the three key elements that we are going to discuss, and I want that to go very quick to this document. Starting with the question of the mapping of the stakeholders, it is very important. So it is really important to understand why we speak about the mapping of the stakeholders. The need to ensure a new mapping of the stakeholders at the national level in the process of climate change is justified by the notion of what we call climate action. The climate action has a different phases, which includes different types of actions, different types of initiatives, different types of activities that so go from sanitation to the development of projects. So the first point, when we want to engage in the mapping of stakeholders at the national level, is first of all to understand what we put in the definition of climate actions. And once we ensure that we get the definition, so we'll see what types of stakeholders we need at the national level to carry out our initiatives in the matter of policy development in terms of elaboration of projects, drafting of projects, and also in process of finance research. We need to understand this thematic. The second merit is to understand that the climate action is a multi-stakeholders points. So it starts from individuals and to the different level. The state is a key core element actor, and you have the stakeholders at the level of the universities. You have the university members. You have the local stakeholders and the organization of the civil society. And this actors against the climate change at the national level. And the other important element to keep in mind is the fact that there are actors that have different and they have different expectations regarding the fight against climate change. There are even some people who are skeptical regarding the climate issue. Some are not even convinced that there is a climate change. So the question is that should we leave them out? We also think no, we have to carry them along for them to understand the developments around what we call the climate change. As these are the actors that will constitute handicap and impediment to the policies of the idea that we present, develop at the national level. So the other elements. So this is dialectic from the global level to the individual level because there are engagement that are taken at the international level that should be transcribed in the national policies and the laws at the local level with the development of local policies and the community level, the family level, even at the individual level, and the reverse movement from individual to achieve the global projects. It is very important after we understand the notion of the climate action, what this involves, and why this notion is justifies the mobilization of all the stakeholders at the national level. It's important to understand the interest of the mapping of stakeholders. First, it's an exercise that helps to motivate leadership and commitment at the level of the policies. Today, you have been privileged to have the Ministry of Environment and Forest Resources among us, and this will be a commitment, a witness to the commitment at the level of the authorities of the country regarding what that should be done at for the fight against the climate change. This also justifies why we need to do this mapping, because if you gather here, all that you are supposed to do, if this cannot encourage, are not motivated at the summum, no action could come to reality, and no action will get the blessing of the authority to be implemented. So the other element that is that the mapping of the stakeholders helps the coordination and the coherence at the level of the actions. One part, this calls for the action of all the stakeholders of the climate process, and this also helps to guarantee a coherent approach in the climate process, and this also helps to do the monitoring of the action, that assessment and monitoring of the action that we could carry in terms of the climate change. So that's a question. Why can we ensure the mapping of the stakeholders? It's a fact that you should mobilize actors, you should engage them. But how? Because there are many studies that have been carried out and which demonstrates that generally the mapping of actors, stakeholders, is limited to the identification of the stakeholders. So the mapping of the stakeholders doesn't is the same as the identification of the actors. You know, to identify the actors is just we know that there are civil society agent members who should be actors. We know that the local policies, they have the private sector, but the mapping goes beyond that. And this mapping helps us to realize how, first of all, how and what is the interest, what is the added value, and what is the influence level of actors, these stakeholders, in the fight against climate change. And here we propose three steps. The first step is the identification of the stakeholders, which is easy. But the second to do is the analysis of the mapping of the stakeholders. Once we identify the actors, stakeholders, and we draft the list, we need to identify the characteristics of each stakeholder, the information that they can add to the climate finance, and the way the process is pertinent for the stakeholders, and how it could be beneficial for them. This should bring in the interest of the actors to engage with us. So it's very important to carry out this exercise. And the analysis of the mapping of actors helps also to define the basis of the stakeholders, their role in the implementation of the fight against climate change. So once we assure that we are able to identify and the characterization of the actors, we can now engage them because we are convinced that, first of all, they understood the message, they have an interest to get in fast, and now the engagement in the process that mobilize current basis of the stakeholders in defining their role, the attribution of the roles, and putting into place of coordination mechanism which is efficient and which will try to see what is the experience and the competence of these actors in the climate change, fight against the climate change. There are some elements, details, but I will just jump it. But there's a light on this element that I want to. At the level of the analysis of the mapping of actors, it's very important to take into account this diagram. Let's go to the 18. Yes, yeah. So it's very important to take into account this diagram. The next one, 18, page 18. So it's very important to take into account this diagram, which we call the diagram of Venn. On this diagram, you can see four sides. The first screen is at the top. It depends on, okay, it's very influential, but less interesting. You can have actors that have a strong influence on the process, the action, climate action, but which are less interested. So how do you do this? So these are actors. If you leave them out, then their influence can block the process. So the question is how we can bring them together to get interested in the process. The second category is under this one. These are actors that have a very weak influence, but which are less interested. It's not because they have less influence that we should leave them out. I think we should make the effort is today that they have a very little influence, but tomorrow, maybe due to some political circumstances regarding the influence evolution of every actor, these actors can become solid actors and influence sustainably the political policy process. Let me give an example. This a group of opposition. You have in the group in the opposition party, and we say as they are always in the opposition, they don't have a strong influence in what is decision making process. But if tomorrow there is an alternate, and it is opposition that is in power, and it is this opposition we have the decision power, making power. So what do you do? So it's very important to also carry the exercise in this sense. And the other side of the screen, you have actors that have a very strong influence and which also who also have a great interest, and they are the key actors that we should integrate in the process. And there are some artists who have a great there's a mistake in the slides. So it is important to take into account this screen in our analysis. And two slides next. So maybe at the end of the mapping of the actors, we should potentially come out with this diagram. This pyramidal shows how to that is government and technical team affiliated. So they have the power to propose decision approaches and orientation regarding climate actions at the national level. And we also have actors that are in charge of technical operations. These are the technicians, different agencies that are in charge of the technical. So you can gather them in a second line layer, and you have the institutional frameworks, which are platforms that gather different sort of actors to, in a way, to assure the alignments at the level horizontal and vertical level at the coordination in the national level. And lastly, we have a financial and technical support agents. I put some crossover there because it depends on the configuration at the level of actors in at the level of every country. But for the fourth category, you have actors, the same thing you find in every country. You have the research centers, the universities, cabinet, consulting cabinets. They are actors that you should take into account in the process of categorization of actors. We also have a support organization, civil society organizations, private sector media. You have the development groups. Yeah, at the end of this mapping, you'll see that some actors that we didn't see the influence in the additional process will have a decisive role in the fight against climate change in our countries. Today, when we take into account the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Education, National Education in our countries, if you see they have a role in the climate change, fight against the climate change, you see what are they going to do? But that's the question you can ask. But if you go into the analysis of what can be the role of the Ministry of Education, National Education, in the process of fights against the climate change, you will realize that it's a ministry that have a pioneer role in changing the behavior at the kindergarten level to getting higher. So it's very important to do this exercise. And I want to stop on this point. So the second point is on the establishment of the financing objectives. Here, you want to lay emphasis on some orientations in terms of process of objective of finance of a lot of our countries. The orientation or the suggestion that we want to make to the NGAs is maybe to cut a process of drafting of a national project on climate change. It's true that there are some countries who have already the country program of GCF. But if you take into account the finance of climate change, it should go. Okay, this is very important to carry out a process by basing on what exists already to elaborate a portfolio, national portfolio on the climate change actions. It is a tool that helps to have at disposal the priorities, key priorities of the country in terms of climate finance. What are the sectors that and what are the actions? And there we put the emphasis on 3 points. So the first element to carry out this process is to take into account strategies and national orientations in terms of climate change. At the level of our countries, we have different policies, climate policies. You have the penny for some countries. We have different policies at the level of the sectorial level. So in the process of the portfolio of these strategies that exist to identify what are the ideas of projects that have been integrated in these national policies and to join them, to blend them, and to see how it can be effective in the fight against climate change. One of the recommendations of the 6th report of GF is 5%, less than 5% of the policies or the initiatives in terms of fight against the climate change are aligned on what we call development, resilient development regarding climate. So they recommend that countries that process of fight against climate change might be at the level of the drafting in terms of policies, in terms of drafting of implementation of projects, to take into account the consideration that help to ensure that the development at the level of countries should be climate resilient. It is in 2 phases. First of all, there's the drafting of the policies and projects, climate projects, and also the drafting of the projects and social political projects, which will align on the priorities of the fight against the climate change at the national level. So it is the way or the means that is proposed, the method. This sets out to make sure that our projects are aligned on the development plan of our countries as the socio-economic plans that we develop in our country should take into account the consideration of the climate change. So the role of the GNS is very key to ensure the coordination with the whole of the ministries of the sectorial level, so that every project, every policy that will be proposed should take into account the question of climate change and also in the investments as well. So the other step that we could carry out is regarding the feasibility studies. Once we finish with the mapping and with the idea of project, we should give a work on the prioritization of the project. And this is based on feasibility. Maybe on 100 ideas that we collected here and there, we want to prioritize on the cost, the means, and the long term, or you can get 30. How can we get to this prioritization? Is by working on the study feasibility studies if we have the means. So we carry out this study to identify regarding each idea to see what is the priority for the country. And in the context where the finance or the means do not allow, we could use the approach of a multi-criteria. It's not a methodology, scientific methodology. It is a qualitative methodology in the context of the climate process. It's not scientific, it's rather qualitative. So for this process, for prioritization of project ideas, you could use this approach. In case you don't have the means to realize, to carry out pre-feasibility studies. So these are some of the criteria that you should take into account to be able to prioritize some ideas that we've gathered for the country projects that we need to analyze. Next slide. And this brings us to another consideration that take into account of the realism of the finance mechanisms. During the process of prioritization of the project ideas, sorry, let me just get back to my notes. Okay, you need to also take into account the question to get to the which instrument of finance or for which sort of projects. So if you have projects of $20 million, $30 million, you can go to the use of tools of finance, which are the gifts. So for projects that are financially higher, of like a project of 130 millions, that should let us go for tools that are higher, the guarantees or the line of loans. And for projects, ideas of projects or portfolio of projects that are estimated to 1 million, 2 million, billions. Okay, our plan of adaptations are estimated to billions. So we cannot mobilize subsidiaries or support to finance all our policies or national policies. And the mechanisms as loans can also become very limited regarding this process. So we have to get to innovative process like IPO or partnership, private and public partnerships, or other forms of markets or mechanisms of markets, capital markets that can help us to mobilize funding at a higher level to be able to finance our project or idea projects. So this will send to the legitimate question of debt, of climate debts. It's a legitimate says that if you have project ideas that will help us to get back a benefit on investments. So the idea of for us, uh, okay, it's a discussion that you might open during the exchanges. And lastly, the last point that is on the alignment on the objectives of finance regarding the GCF or other mechanisms of financing of funding. So you know that GCF at the time of prioritization of our project ideas to constitute our portfolio of projects, it is important to take into account what are the strategic orientation of the different finance mechanisms that we target. If we take into for instance the GCF, that part of our projects ideas, naturally we need to refer to the new strategy plans of the GCF 2024-2027, which clearly specified the objectives of results. And these are some of these objectives, which gives a clear orientation regarding what the GCF as finance mechanisms want to fund for the next 4 years. So you have the priority which is given to the early warning system. You also have the prioritization of all that is full security. You also have ideas of priority given to all projects that favor the conservation and the restoration, sustainable restoration of maritime zones, protection of the ecosystem. You have the question of resilient infrastructures for against carbon and natural energy, and also priority of which is on transport, buildings, and industries. So these are some of the priorities and realities in terms of priority for the GCF for the 4 years to come. So in the drafting or our discussions, that is the entities, accredited entities, which carry projects towards us, with whom we discuss to constitute projects to make them understand these objectives of the GCF, so that the project that we should want to present to align with these objectives and which will give us a strong possibility to finance. We will have many ideas, but when it is presented, the GCF, these conceptual notes will sleep in the GCF drawers. So if we take the example, of energy generation, which are generating energy, which at the level of the GCF zero, phase zero, at the beginning, they play emphasis on the energy, the generation of energy. At the first level of recirculation, GCF1, the emphasis on the generation of the energy became relative points. Okay. So during the GCF2, the second phase of the refinement funds, because at that time GCF supplied, uh, granted means for the generation of energy. So it is very important to take into account all the changes, all the movements of the mechanisms, finance mechanism in terms of priority, so that in at the drafting points, not only at the level of our climate policies, but also at the level of some other projects, we should see how we could have a portfolio that's bankable, so that this can be translated into reality on the field. So these are some of the elements that I wanted to share with you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Kofi Kumasi, for the presentation. That gives us some rules of approaching the elaboration of the drafting of the countries, and also for summarizing a good time. This presentation. Before Mr. Kumasi lose the floor, I would like to see if there are some questions, observations that are for him. And also, don't forget, I think that you are with us till the end of the to be with us till the end of the forum. Because of the time, we don't want to ask a question. We still be able to go to tomorrow and after tomorrow. I think that I would like to thank you once again. I'm sorry. Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Kumasi. If you don't ask his question, that means that it seems like we do not understand. So I would like to comment what he said. Just to tease my friend quickly, until when can we say that the document has been taken into consideration? The questions of climate change. At which level? What are the parameters that can help us to indicate us that this document is really related to climate change? The approach he also mentioned the overview of the list related to the regional policies and also how to fit in the approaches. Is it to move from the national or the regional one? I'd like to thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Just not questions, but contributions regarding to the experience that we witnessed and observed on the field. According to the mapping that the stakeholders, sometimes we have difficulties that we face. If we finish this mapping of the stakeholders during meetings, we will have difficulties in terms of presentation because sometimes they're still actors. So sometimes they will send you an intern to this kind of a meeting, who does not really matter. It's also that's a decision of the meeting to the civil societies. Sometimes you see that once you organize it until that you are not invited. The object of the purpose of this mission is is for the quality of the presentation to the workshop, the meeting that we are posting. This is what we are observing as a partner, the first observation. Existence of the problem that we have is also the cost of those projects. I think that sometimes the simulation we exaggerate a little bit, especially when we take the MVs, the we have sometimes exceed what our national budget, and make sure that the amount that we have, and make sure that the partners are going to take them into account. I think that sometimes even if we have this simulation of amount, we should have a fixed amount so that the partners can find coherence in our proposals. And I think it is also that the policy. We also have, I think that we have a problem there regarding the policies and techniques. Because sometimes technical, on the technical side, they do a lot of things, but there is no policy. There is no appropriation on the level of the policy because it lacks regular meetings between the stakeholders. And sometimes there are things that scope. There is no synergy until not only on the technical side, but even policies. And because sometimes I think that the policies we need to have the dialogue, we should organize the dialogues with the technical institution to really work as a national level to that this is what I'd like to share with you briefly for this session. Thank you so much. Dr. Kamei. According to what he said, it is also a political commitment in our country as well. But in the case of Niger, on the level of national level, we need to have a commission. And for this time also, the center for the green funds. At our level, we had a technical committee that raised this issue. And after that, there were no meeting, another meeting. And so these are the social conflict that we have. That we are doing as an activity, including the program of the country, exchanges. We should know how we can do this and that, and also go to the technical issue so for the climate. But nothing has been taken, has been done. We also talk about the minister of energy, and these are the difficulties that we have at the national level in our country. So that we have documented that we have projects so that sometimes it exceeds and then we need to revise to do it again. In 2022, we had our meeting, but it wasn't adopted. Our policy, the policy that has not been up to now, the policy has not been adopted. 2022, then 2024, so that will be no mobilization, but up to now there is no issue. Thank you, Dr. Kanawe and Joe Kofi for reaction to those observations. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for some interventions, which are much more contributions and some few reactions, quick reactions. So for the first question regarding my big brother Agrinya, to which level you can document consider as climate sensitive. For me, it's from the practice. It is not to read the document and to understand or to determine whether it is climate compatible or not. There are some tools, assessment tools and analysis tools for policy documents and laws, which will help to determine whether they are climate compatible. One of the suggestions here is maybe that at the moment of the drafting of the documents, once we have a draft that is evaluated, you can conduct this evaluation before so that we see that whether our policy documents or our portfolio of projects or our law have learned that since we show Togo has a law on climate change, which is the pipeline. This is a law, a draft of law that's have to make a small exercise of analysis to see the sensitive, climate sensitive character of this law. Because a law on climate that is climate compatible law, because there are some evaluation tools that you can use. And we have developed some tools with the SSA that we tested them in different situations and it is working well. So there's no barometer we use from afar to detect this sensitivity. The question of what is level between the national policy of this national level and the regional level, I think all this depends on the context and the needs of the region regarding the other countries. In some countries, yes, this region dialectic, country region dialectic. And in this context, if there's a sort of fragility or weakness at the level of the community commitment, at the level of the coordination, the alignments at the level of the region and what the country decides, then there is the inverse that is done. Countries can adopt strategies, climate strategies, and before around the town, you have regional strategies together. There are many countries that have elaborated their country strategies regarding the climate change. Before the ECOWAS has had some time propose these strategies. So all this depends on the level of severity of that the countries need to give to the regional level to ensure the dialectic. Maybe a quick reaction to the intervention to estimative methodologies on the climate policies, because generally, okay, we should define the cause of the climate actions. I think regarding the adaptation, we need to have a discussion which is being carried out at the level of the one organization and estimation cost of the actions, adaptation, ideas of adaptation. We need to carry out this work, background work, before we could bring out our project ideas. At the level of the reporting, at the level of the policy approach, you can have different aspects. Fortunately, we have a minister of environment who is very engaged in presence. Maybe I'll say it. It is to congratulate him this morning. I was saying that I'm happy that you have and the Minister of Environment that is on time. That every time he's invited in a ceremony, he's always on time. He never come at 11, 12. In some countries, and in some countries, other countries, we prepare for ministers up to 12 o'clock before we start the ceremony, the opening ceremony. So yes, I think that we have these cases in the other contexts where in for some different reason the minister is engaged or at the political level there's this engagement, but there's no presence. This presence there. So the scope will be different from the presence. So at the end of the summit, the President of the Republic say that go with this action, engage. I will make a speech to carry out the objective of my country regarding climate change. I think it's a commitment, and I remember that we realized a work some years ago where we tried to analyze actions you're going to carry out and commit us to contribute. So every context is important to do a sort of relaxation of restriction, not to compare. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Kukwasi. Thank you. Maybe you people can also react to this. Madam Mary, do you want to add a point? No. What I want to signal is to see even for some aspects, for which are, for example, will be subjective of development of policies, the question of strategies. It exists some instruments and tools well prepared that you can base on to produce policy documents that are climate centered and to also put to assess the different policies that you have. Okay, so let's not forget what the SSA has done in this framework, and I encourage you to approach Mr. Kofi Kumasi to Sandra, to when there's this needs, you'll be able to speak and learn from it. I didn't want to take the floor, but what you just said has just brought a question in my mind. What I'll say is the highest degree of integration is a methodology that will take into account not only the science, but also the compatibility with the global objective for the temperature 1.0, 5 degree. Some people is able to align policies to this level is the highest level that you can imagine. After that, you could have also scientific approach steps without getting to this level. It's also very good. But you can also have documents that only make reference, which is aspirational, but it's a vision that is translated, and these are just some words that are placed to do the connotation. So these are some of the different degrees that we could say between the weak and highest commitments regarding climate. Thank you, Sandra. And once again, thank you, Kofi Kumasi, for your sharing this with us. Let's clap for him. I know that the day is getting to an end. Some of us have to move again, but however, there's one last element very interesting. This morning, Sandra made allusion to the development of an instrument, analysis instrument, and we would like to ask our friend Dr. Nichu Chalinim to come and give us a taste of what is being done for what is this instrument of climate analysis. So, Doctor, we are happy to have you here. He just arrived today. I hope you are not too much tired, and this will not disturb you during this presentation. We are ready to listen to your presentation.
Merci.
Thank you.
Et qui sont donc là à cette rencontre très clé.
Thank you, all the participants to this key forum to talk about the policies of climate. So, as I have been said, I'm here to present the importance and the development of tools of climate
the context and justification for why we have to develop a climate online tool. And then we're going to look at the climate rationale as a key determinant for assessing climate funds, challenges in developing robust climate rationale for African countries, the AI and LLM opportunity for addressing climate rational conception challenges, and addressing climate impact assessment with an online climate analysis tool. And we're going to end with introducing the features of the African Adaptation Initiative and a sustainable solution for Africa's jointly developed online climate analysis toolkit. So we know that Africa is one of the most vulnerable in terms of impact of climate change, despite contributing minimally to emissions. So Africa's climate vulnerabilities include the intensifying climate hazards, economic dependency on climate-sensitive sectors such as agriculture, data and capacity gap, and urgency for climate action. Addressing these issues is filling data gaps, strengthening climate resilience, supporting development of climate-sensitive sectors, and facilitating access to climate finance. The cornerstone of climate funds access is the development of a convincing science-based climate rationale. So let's look at the climate rationale as a key determinant for assessing climate funds. The first point here is the fact that the climate rationale is an exercise evidence-based decision-making. Okay, so this is the first point to look at. And the second point is the climate rationale helps to align with national and global goals. The third point is the fact that the climate rationale comes with helping funding agencies ensure that resources address the most urgent and impactful needs. We also have the transparency and accountability issues, where the climate rationale provide a strong rationale for creating transparency in the funding process and ensuring an understanding of project criteria selection. We also have the point relating to enhancing climate resilience and mitigation. For instance, projects must demonstrate how they contribute to mitigating climate change and building adaptive capacities. We also have risk management as well. And the key point here is that developing a robust climate rationale can be challenging for countries, especially the ones with less human and financial resources. For the challenges regarding climate rationales, especially for African countries, we have some few key points here. The first point is data and information challenges. We're going to talk about that when discussing the tool. The first point is we have limited data availability. We have poor data quality and gaps. We have difficulty in assessing existing data. And from a technical and capacity constraint standpoint, we have limited technical expertise, poor integration of interdisciplinary knowledge, and difficulty communicating complex climate science. We also have institutional and governance issues. For instance, weak institutional frameworks, limited policy alignment, and bureaucratic barriers. Developing a robust climate rationale can be challenging for countries with less human and financial resources. And we do have other challenges as well, such as resource constraints. We discussed a lot. From funders, I think we discussed the fact that the GCF is changing its policies and it's creating a lot of need for adaptation to those new policies. We have competing priorities. For instance, we're developing countries and we might have other priorities. We also have the lack of standardized frameworks.
The adoption of artificial intelligence and large language models is all over the news. And the question is to see if a large adoption of those tools can help, for instance, address issues that we mentioned before. For instance, if easy access to those tools at a cheap price can, for instance, solve the problem relating to, for instance, financial resources problems and access to, for instance, technical expertise. We all know this. AI and LLMs are transforming how organizations and government and stakeholders are approaching climate challenges. The process of creating strong, evidence-based climate rationales can be streamlined, made more accurate, and scaled globally with these new tools. LLMs particularly show good prospect, for instance, for automation of documentation and reporting, which are the cornerstone of climate rational documents. LLMs like GPT-4, for instance, can draft clear, well-structured climate rational documents by synthesizing scientific studies, policy frameworks, and data insights if well prompted. So LLMs for reduced time and effort required for proposal writing by generating funding agencies, tailored drafts, summaries, and reports.
And I do apologize to
Yes.
interrupt you,
Sure.
but actually a couple of participants have brought this to attention. Some of these terms, some of us are not used to that. You are into large language models all the time, but please let us know what LLMs are so that everybody is brought up to page. You know, so we could see the technician in him, but the rest of us are a little bit lost in there.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much for bringing this to my attention. Basically, large language models, artificial intelligence models that are actually trained to produce coherent purpose of text. Right? Let's say I want to write a paragraph, I want to write a briefing, I want to write a concept note. So I could prompt my LLM or my artificial intelligence agent to produce such a document for me. The models are actually trained many types of text from different languages like French, English, Chinese, Korean. And what they do is they actually model the statistical relationships between words when they're used to produce coherent paragraphs and text. So based on these fundamental and scientifically designed structures, the machines are able to create links between what, for instance, we desire and what we could get, for instance, as a result for like a paragraph or whatever we ask the AI to do. I'm not sure if this introduction is
That's perfect.
good enough.
That brings us up to speed, and then we can follow you better.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And for instance, so in the context of climate change and all the documents that go along with that, we have a lot of writing. We have documents like concept notes. We have to write briefings. We have to write proposals, and it's often difficult to make sure that our writings are aligned with, for instance, different agencies' criteria and comparing to we don't have access to expertise or financial resources to, for instance, hire international experts. So what AI and, for instance, large language models are bringing to the table is somehow technical writing expertise at a cheap price. And the question here is, how do we, for instance, adapt these tools to our situation, for instance, in developing countries where we don't have resources, and These technologies to produce coherent documents that will probably be funding for us to really solve the climate issue.
I just want to and you believe at the end of the agitation you are done. No, even worse. It's important to free our energy and focus it on implementation. We want to make easier the funding proposal development. So using this tool, we develop quickly, and then we take the time to implement, because this is for us where effort should be made. Over.
Thank you, Sandra, for this interesting key points. So, and for instance, at SSA, we are currently developing with African Adaptation Initiative a tool that is going to embed with AI and traditional ways of collecting, processing, and analyzing climate data. Okay, and actually to facilitate the efficient preparation and creation of scientific evidences through a climate data collection platform. That's the first point. We want to also foster concise and complete AI-based literature reviews. So the platform is actually organized around four core modules. The first one is the climate assessment module. Actually assess the climate just like we do it traditionally. And in the second module, where we integrate AI tools to provide literature review. The third module is about on-demand report generation, where we can be able to prompt LLMs to provide us with interesting reports, such as concept notes, funding proposals, even responding to reviewers. Sometimes it's very important. We apply for instance, for GCF funding. They come up with a lot of jargons. It's sometimes difficult to kind of figure out what they're trying to say, and LLMs can become very good at helping us solving or responding to these comments or reviews. The last point, it's actually going to be the stakeholders collaboration module. Here I'm going to bring your attention to one point. The LLMs are still being developed, and because they are statistical models, there are still errors. There are still texts that are generated that are not the space of how we think and speak. And it's sometimes important to take the document through a different loop, which is the review loop. For instance, asking experts to go through the document again to fact check everything that is said by the LLM in order to make sure that the text is not just coherent, but it's actually right, it's true, and it's science-based. So this is the fourth module that we're going to be providing for the tool. We are still at the starting stage. We have a prototype now, and I'm going to quickly ask them if possible to allow us to to display. Yeah. So just like I said, this tool is being developed jointly by Sustainable Solution for Africa and African Adaptation Initiative. Here we have like the home page. All right. Next step. So to take care about the security, we have to make sure that people accessing this information are the right one. Next step. And then what we try to do here is to provide a list-based selection of countries that we want to work with. So we have the, can you go to the other side, please? Where we have the list? No, the other side, the list. Yes. So we can choose countries from there, or just like you could have realized it, we can also choose it on the shape files of the countries that we have on the African map. So what we need to do is ask him to choose Tanzania. Can you choose Tanzania, please? You can choose it from the list or from the shape file. It's still fine. Yes. So when I choose Tanzania, for instance, I have the first screen that shows me the topographical map of Tanzania. So displaying the geographical features of Tanzania. And then I can also have a look at the brief description of what is going on, especially in terms of topography. Next step, maybe we can look at the economics. Yes. So we have different economic concentration maps. For instance, we have another view of how this thing are playing out over the country. Maybe we can go to the next step. Yes, where we have the impact assessment tools. For instance, drought, floods, and heat stress. Okay. And then we also have temperature and precipitation projections, which are very important for us to check how we're doing regarding 1.5 degree or 3 degrees Celsius mandates. We also have the climate profile when we look at how the climate has been actually playing out for the historical periods. All these different maps, we also have the changes, right, based on the different climate projections regarding the share socioeconomic pathways. For instance, the SSP 245 and 585. We also have the observation regarding temperature. Okay, so basically we have a tool where we can kind of create all the data sets and for instance, avoid the tedious task that is usually difficult. I'm just saying it right now, the most important thing is to really solve the climate problem on the ground rather than getting dirty with all these technical tools which most might not be familiar with. Have a default one where, for instance, based on the country, you can actually pull out all differences that are available and kind of ask the AI to jointly write a coherent report for you. Of course, you're going to check it because you're going to fact check whatever it's written there. But at least you save time by having something to start with. And then you can have also an advanced one because today large language models are developed based on a large corpus of text, but we might need to tailor it to, for instance, stay in the space of climate concepts and climate jargon. And so we might want to prompt the LLM to stay within the context of climate. We might also ask, for instance, we might ask the LLM to help us to stay within a certain format of documents by pointing or augmenting the prompt with specific documents that we might want report to follow. Okay, we might also, for instance, provide a number of pages based on the fact that we might want it to be concise or more like expanded. All these things are becoming possible today. And what we are trying to do is to catch up with the trend and make the climate community to harness these powerful tools and to allow these tools to become a factor of advancement, a factor of being able to produce these documents faster, allowing us to maybe spend less money on these international so-called experts and use the money, just like Madam said, to focus on the implementation of the climate programs or projects. This is basically the nutshell what we're trying to do. This is still at the prototype phase, just like I said. But we're working conjointly with our partners to really make this platform become something that can be easy to use, easy to integrate. For instance, accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Itu.
Quite interesting, quite, and I think even for this one, we'll stay until 7 or 8. So I'd like to see if there are or observations for Dr. Itu before we close the day. And otherwise, yes, please go ahead. Okay, and then Madam Mary. Yes, thank you very much. Thanks so I was just looking to maybe I want to very short on students. I want to be sure that the information generated by the system or the tool is representative of the country. I want to know until this is it's to generate these informations. Merci beaucoup pour la présentation. Thank you so much. Qui contient les informations détaillées aussi sur. Thank you for the presentation. That's the tool includes all the temperature, the fit automatics related to the characteristics. Thanks. Actually, I want to share a couple of, you've partially addressed them actually during your intervention that came to my mind when we came to there. And these are saying it's only half in jest, but in reality, it's a big problem, what we call hallucination when we're dealing with those large language models. And I've seen that in the 4th module, you are partly addressing that, but then you've got to me the idea, okay, we're going to go back to those famous experts that you talked about, but that was one of my concerns when we started. How do we address that issue of the generative model's ability to actually create something that may not be true? And then the other one that I had, which also you've partly addressed, is the fact that you get better results when your prompting is better. And I see here really that you have integrated something that enables to refine the prompting. So I'll just say, yes, I just want to say that I'm really impressed and I'm really eager to go ahead and really to try that. So please, I'll let you, Dr. Ni, to address those questions and observations. Oh, yeah. So maybe I can use. Yeah, maybe it's working better now. Yes, thank you. So the first question was about people who took all this company before. So what we usually do when it comes to climate assessment studies, we use knowledge quality control data sets.
coming from global organizations such as the NASA and other American agencies. I think we have the US aid that is here that has also done a lot of work regarding providing, for instance, a satellite-based data sets that we often use as a proxy to observation, because just like I mentioned in the presentation, we sometimes have data sets that are incomplete. Sometimes they are not even existent, especially in rural areas. And sometimes we face the problem of spatial completeness. Right? So you might have data in Zulukin, but no data in Palini, data is from 1950 to let's say 1998, and you have data in Palini from 1998 to 2000. So how do you reconcile all this fragmented set of temporal frames across the area we're looking at? So yes, we do sometimes, especially when like there is a focus, like a specific project. For instance, we do visit the installations to make sure that the observation materials that are there are compliant with, for instance, the WMO guidances. And we also make sure that the procedure for collecting the data sets are well compliant with international standards. Maybe I will give you an anecdote. I used to know one guy from a meteorological agency in a country in Africa. He used some time to go out and not willing to go to the site, just look at the air and say, maybe today is 22 degrees Celsius, and just write it down. So goings of eating, for instance, these facilities are very important. And I think within some projects, we do go to actually make sure that everything from the device that is used to measure and the personnel that is actually collecting and archiving the data, everything is compliant. So, la deuxième question, c'était sur le détail sur les paramètres.
So the second question is about the details and the parameters. Actually, we have had a very fast presentation as in the profile climate. We show the data to have a barometer in a zone, in an area. You have the maximum temperature and minimum temperature that you use for the climate indicators, particularly the indicators of vulnerabilities and droughts and floods. So all these parameters actually are taken into account, and they are detailed in the methodology that is used to produce whatever we put on the platform.
I'll come back to the issues about hallucinations. We discussed.
Um, I explained the fact that these models are approximations. So based on statistical relationships that might exist within the corpus of text that has been written before, like and there is a lot of raising concerns to the fact that we've not exhausted all the combination of words that might be used to generate text, and therefore sometimes using these models might constrain us to continue to think the way or to write the way people have been writing, and therefore this might be a sort of a challenge for advancing writing itself and for instance creative writing and all those other issues. This is actually a problem, And I think a lot of scientific bodies and agencies are still working on how to make this LLM more generalized, if I could say that. And for the hallucination problems, also the fact that we can generate text that sounds interesting but not actually true. This is where I think there are a lot of guidances even for scientific journals and agencies that are producing documents online to actually acknowledge the use of AI if somehow an AI tool was used along the production of the text that is being published. There's also the question of fact checking. That's very important. And there's also this interesting kind of iteration within the AI model itself, where you can actually give back the text to the AI model, or at least to an adversary AI model, and ask the teacher to correct what, for instance, the other AI model has produced. And with this adversarial kind of gaming kind of strategies, we somehow get to an optimum where the text is quite coherent, and also so these are some of the avenues when it comes for hallucination regarding LLMs. The key thing here is that even for human beings, we always have a first draft. So I encourage everyone using LLMs to see whatever the LLM is producing at the first draft, and to do due diligence, right, as an expert, to really go through every single sentence and make sure that everything is fact checked. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very interesting, and happy to hear that the project is moving. Just one question. There's a lot of data that we have in our NAPs. So when you develop NAPs, you spend, I don't know, many years generating data, and will assist, I suppose, the models because they have more downscale data. To what extent do you use that? And how do you deal with downscale data, which is not, which is actually a real big challenge for African countries? Just, yeah, thanks.
Yes,
Thank you so much. I'm a little bit skeptical for the use of the artificial intelligence, because here it is a matter of strategic matters and for the development of a country. So I'm going to let the AI deal with that. I'm a little bit skeptical about this. So I had an urgent phone call. It is a statistician. When you say that it is in our field of statistics, is there any field like this, or is there no any other probability? These are the questions that we need to look at. My greatest worry is if we give the same information, approximately the same information of two countries, LLM, and
can produce or can make a document, a drafted document for us, so that law we have to deal with two different countries that have different priorities. Can you see that my skepticism can be justified a little bit? These are the dangers that I can see as a statistician. However, I'm satisfied with the draft. So let's take sentence by sentence. Why have we let this agent to do this? So why can we look at our sentence by sentence? These are my hours, but it is a kind of interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor. But I'm to bring back to you. For the first question regarding using the documentation that was produced before in different political or climate context. First of all, we know that LLMs are actually designed to be general purpose tools. So we have to actually manage to constrain a whole set of relationships within words. And these large relationships can become detrimental when we want to be focused. For instance, stay within the realms of the climate. And recently, there has been a lot of development with what we call RAGs, reality augmented generation, where we actually use the general purpose LLM, but we actually add a level of prompting, just like we did in the app. So using specific documents that we know are accurate and that are supposed to actually constrain the model to stay within the guideline and a kind of like augmented modeling, if we could call it like that, to kind of reduce the generalized kind of space of all relationship that might exist within words. This is the first thing. The second issue about downscaling. The issue of downscaling is a big issue because I studied downscaling for my PhD and my doctoral studies. The issue is that we want to be able to provide local scale level applications, especially when it comes to vulnerability. For instance, looking at things like community violence, gender, and exposure, for instance, to diseases based on different climate scenarios. It's very important to have information at a very refined grid level. And we are still far from having the computational resources to dynamically solve this physical. And so therefore, what we do sometimes is to approximate those physics-based equations by using a statistical modeling because it's fast. But just like the professor said right now, statistics are kind of an approximation, and there are still errors and uncertainties that get piled up as we go on because the models that like say the forcing models, like the low resolution model that we are using to kind of zoom in and get the local information, also coming with other sets of uncertainties and errors. And so we call it uncertainty on top of uncertainty. And how we deal with that is to actually look at different models. So we try to have as much as we can so that averaging all those models as an ensemble statistically tends to reduce that uncertainty. So for AI tools helping with scaling, we're seeing a lot of progress, especially Google recently is able to actually produce cheaply what a physics model uh, was doing based on like a large set of computational resources. This is, let's say, a first step toward using AI for solving these issues, especially in contexts like Africa, where we don't have accountability. Right? So the model is approximating what is happening based on a set of relationships. And sometimes we don't have a full set of measurement of all like the variable of the atmosphere. So we have to go with what we have. And we know that actually modeling the atmosphere or the different variables based on those kind of constraint rules can come with a lot of errors and uncertainties. So I think the best practice is to acknowledge everything you do in methodology, clearly state what you did, and stop being shy from saying if your models have disadvantages, or if, for instance, your models are good for some things and bad for other things. So I think here we need a level of ethics, transparency, and a little bit of compliance also with like from a legal perspective, maybe because we're doing this job to help our communities and we somehow have to respond to those responsibilities. Yeah. So I think that's what I could say for downscaling. It's good, AI is doing a lot of things, but we still have to be cautious because it's still far from explaining what those models are actually doing. We know that they're somehow guessing what is going on, but we seems not to clearly understand how we are actually approximating the physics we are supposed to actually compute with these physics-based models that
I really understand as some scientists to be worried about everything that you guys the development in this way. Well, what I can say here, as I already said, to make effort, to do diligence, to check everything that has been produced. And as I added, the AI become more and more interesting in dealing with acting as correctors. I think that those toolkits should be tested. We take time to test them to understand the levels of capacity that they have when the same. And sometimes why not use a lot of agents? Today it's true that we talk about ChatGPT, OpenAI, then there are some other models that Gemini, Google, Mistral, um, a lot of AI
which are all already on the market. And also, when you take when the climate literature with the use of gatherings to start looking at if these tests of generation cannot be done, based on the analysis, for example, when you want to generate a document, you can generate by the five AIs. The last question was also related to the fact that if you should read documents sentence by sentence, why should we use make use of AI to do that? I disagree. I don't really agree 100% with the professor. In studies, postdoc, doctor, something to start with. It really helps them to start quickly. It is even so quickly, it is so really quick. And what I can give as a recommendation or to urge is also to devote a time to deal with what goes around with the LLM to try more to understand the methodological basis, the appropriate usage. Maybe you lose the deterministic logic that we are a little bit familiar to since the elementary, etc. Numbers, and then we have results. And also, it's a little bit this era for storaging that is being involved. There's no scientific, there's just a recommendation so that you try to embrace what is going on. It should run more in those environments to really and to better understand what is going on, and also to try to do the prompting. It's very important because I think that before we had libraries and people who work in documentation, those that were too meticulous and who were really able to explain things step by step. See us to come back to a paradigm of decomposition, a canonic decomposition to express so that but I think it is a debate that is continuous. There's no perfect answer, but I think that is very important. I'm to give a personal testimony. There's a little testimony, and I will want to have to do LLM on subjects of military policy. There is no problem. It is the chance that has been developed. There are a lot of artists that are involved is to avoid paradoxes. But here, we need strategies and measures. LLM can give you that. You see, it can also help you a little bit to move, but to do things according to the measures, according to the measures of Togo, RDC, sure. I embrace everything that comes that. So you can see things that are already set according to measures. Well, regarding things that are put in general, the review of the literature is abundant, but is not the same of the strategy 3030 for regarding LDC, Togo. It is in this way that I want to give precision. So much. My friend, my neighbor used to remind me of being her neighbor. I understand his skepticism, but I know people, commonplace, those people who are my teams, my leaders, when we go attend a workshop, sometimes they will take everything. But they know that when they go to the workshop, they know that when they come back, they can write everything. So the LLM require helping us to avoid those things. But yet there are information that you have, he will agree with me today that there are some specific data that there is skepticism. So for me, it's like a work group that is dealing with the AI seriously, even if what you are eating, if the AI will tell you more than what you know, you are compelled to grow. The more we adapt, the less we be afraid. Whether the life is complicating us, that's as our GCF friends details that we are compelled to move. Then congratulations to the presenter. He knows what he's talking about. To add the two words. We have statistics, and I agree with you, but I really encourage you to try. Every subject that interests you, you can go on the AI. So as Sandra said, you're going to be surprised, including the points that are particularly precise. Another thing that I really want to reinforce or corroborate what you said, Dr. Mitu, is to encourage each one another to get trained for on the protein engineering protein. Protein engineering. And there are some lot of resources, online resources that you are not going to spend cash so that you can to interact with the AI. But for the AI, once you start using it, and I personally, I cannot wait to get to test to try this model. But I really like to thank you. As I said, our sister, it is a fantastic. It's only that you showed how to proceed very well, but to simplify, most of us really have this level, technical level. I thank you all. And Dr. Newton also is expecting to see you to be available during the discussion of this forum so that we can continue with the professor. I would like to thank all the other interveners. My team, despite some OKs, we're going to finish 5 minutes okay before the program. Now we are closing this first day. That help us, that help to reach the, and also to put in this aspect of capacity building, increase our knowledge, update our knowledge in the field, in the development at the institutional level, so that to know when we come back, we can go deeper in the details, talk about precise aspect and readiness and the approach of project based on accreditation based on project. And I think that today has helped us to have this basis. Also, the institutional level to reinforce our capacity in the scientific approaches. So I would like to thank all the interveners, all the participants. For the continuity of the program to this program, we started talking about the AI social event. From our forms of finance are already available. So if there was some of them that are more useful, would like to discuss about the Belgium, the stipend with on the table so that they can go and meet them. Then while we are preparing for the social event. Thank you also to the technical team. So interpreter, not only the interpreters, but we also have the engineers that are also at the back. Thanks to all. And so those who also help us with the food and drinks and the refreshment. So this brings us to the end of today's program. To see tomorrow morning, but then before that we'll do social events and those that want to
The social event starts in some few minutes. So the time we go for the financial, the allowance at the financial office. So you can get our allowances.
So thank you very much and see you tomorrow. Donc, on confirme avec Sandra. Oui, je pense qu'on va mettre ça le troisième. Elle disait qu'elle voulait mettre ça le troisième jour en confirme. On répondait à la RDC, le Togo, le Mali. On parlait un peu d'accréditation. Voilà, c'était juste ça. Donc, donnez juste 2 secondes. Et puis, je voulais vérifier que j'ai votre adresse email. Parce que là, il n'est pas fini les prolongations. Donc, on peut faire tout de suite. Hein? Donc, si vous voulez par WhatsApp ou bien par WhatsApp. Si vous avez votre adresse email.
So what is the social event? It's what time now? There's a bottle of